Welcome to E-commerce with Coffee, a podcast powered by Amber Engine, where we share e-com secrets for brands over your favorite brew. We start with the caffeine and then leap enthusiastically into behind-the-scenes e-com insights that led to the success of our guests. I'm Nate Svoboda, and I'm about to serve you up the best. Let's get started. Welcome to today's episode of E-commerce with Coffee. I have the pleasure of speaking with Kat Day. She is the president and co-founder of Ettitude, which is a mission-driven global textiles brand that makes all of their products with bamboo. So today we're going to be talking about some of the questions that all of us should really be wanting the answer to in the world of e-commerce. So Kat, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, before we dive in, I know we were just talking about this. You're a busy person, right? You've got a lot of stuff going on in the day. I imagine that caffeine has got to play some role in your life.
You know, the funny thing is I don't drink anything caffeinated. I do drink a lot of herbal teas. So I'm currently drinking herbal tea. That's my warm beverage. And that's because I'm my mom and I have two babies. And that's why I stopped drinking caffeine. But I do love a couple of brands in the caffeinated space. And I recently became familiar with Copper Cow Coffee, which is a Vietnamese pour-over coffee that's sustainably sourced. And it seems really great. My husband loves it. And I smelled it and it looked amazing. I love the smell of coffee. Don't drink it.
No, and that's fair. I know a lot of people who are the same way. That's, people like to sit in a coffee shop for that exact reason, and they don't even drink the coffee. So I'll have to check that brand out. I'd never heard of it. I've been wanting to buy a pour over contraption. I don't even know if device is really the right word for it, but
yeah, it's super simple. I love
What kind of tea are you drinking? Like, I know you said herbal, but
yeah, currently it's a mix of chamomile and something else in there. So
something to get the mind right as we go into the afternoon this Friday.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Kat, before even coming to Ettitude, you had a variety of experiences. This was maybe a little open, but I was wondering if you could talk to, what is the biggest strength you brought to the team at Ettitude that maybe wasn't there prior? Or
yeah, absolutely. Well, I joined the team. Well, I met my co-founder back in 2018, and the company was very young at that point. We had product market fit. We had the product developed, which is the strength of my co-founder. She really spent a lot of time in R&D developing our unique technology and our final product, and the fabric that we use today, which is clean bamboo. It's the most sustainable fabric on the planet today, and the result of that is it's very soft and super breathable. It makes you sleep better. Plus, it's better for the planet. So that was the strength that was already existing in the team. And certainly the brand was getting some really great word of mouth versus what I ended up bringing to the team is experience in scaling direct to consumer brands. Because prior to joining Ettitude as a co-founder, I actually founded, scaled, and sold another DTC brand called Try the World, which is a food subscription company that sends you food from around the world to your doorstep. It was named number 3 fastest growing company in New York. So I definitely learned a lot about the trials and tribulations of scaling a DTC company and what it takes at the ground level. So that's really what I brought. We didn't have to make the same mistakes that I made before. Being a second-time founder was really helpful from that perspective. It felt really easy actually to start a second company. Understanding how to allocate our super limited resources at the time into the right tests that could, really inform our future investments and where we're going to push. And then just the scrappy attitude that you need in the beginning stages, you really don't have a lot of resources. And so what are you going to do? How are you going to pull everything that you have into, this company?
And I heard in an interview that you and Phoebe did, you both talked a lot about exactly that, right? The complementary skill sets that you both had together. Could you talk a little bit about Ettitude, right? I know it's obviously a very mission-driven brand. It's sustainable. It's, about the environment. I believe that your previous brand was fairly mission-driven as well. So that seems to be a theme for you in your career. Is there any particular reason for that in your own mind? And then maybe how does running a brand that's mission driven and they're focused on something specific like that, how is running a brand like that different than the alternative?
I don't have experience in running a brand that is not mission driven, to be honest, but I can imagine that it's not as motivating. because you're just chasing profit, or maybe you're trying to just create a product and get it to as many people as possible. For me, I really find a lot of motivation in having this mission that is helping other people or helping the environment or just in general making the world better. It makes it easier to get up in the morning when things are not going well. So you definitely need that something else that creates a positive impact. At least in my life, I decided to spend my efforts on something that could make the world better. And even before starting Try the World, I actually had more corporate experience in strategy at Weight Watchers, which of course is also a mission-driven company that helps people lead healthier lives. And so I really got inspired by the fact that thanks to the mission, the entire team of hundreds of people and actually, tens of thousands of freelancers that they have is so energized to help bring this mission together. And I think that's so important because as your company scales, you need that motivation that you personally, as a leader, will have a challenge to bring unless you have this mission.
And plus, I imagine having that guiding light, right, of every decision you as a company are going to make is going to have to drive towards that ultimate goal or vision or whatever it is that you're supporting. So I imagine that also probably makes it easier or harder, depending on how you think about it. Well, so Kat, what we're actually here to talk about today, right? Brands that are just now getting into e-commerce. Now they feel like they have a lot of catching up to do, right? E-commerce rocketed in growth in just even the first 10 months of COVID, right? I mean, we saw, wasn't it like 10 years of growth in a 3-month period or something like that? So I'd imagine that normally there's a steady strategic approach to growth, even in today's super, competitive environment. But maybe can you talk to us about what it looks like for a brand that goes all in on, a faster or a riskier growth strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really depends on where you're playing in the industry that you're playing. If there's a lot of competition at this point and you have very little differentiation, then it's all about, how can you capture market share through just throwing dollars into marketing? If you have a defensible product that is really differentiated, then you can afford to be a bit slower and more conscious about your growth. It's going to be also really challenging if you have no differentiation to raise that capital in order to grow quickly. So it's really kind of a matter of, I think, in my perspective, being innovative on the product side. At the end of the day, that's what's really going to win. If you have an amazing product that people rave about and you create a community where people are actually advertising the product for you, then you could be a lot more successful.
No, and I think that's super fair, right? And so I guess thinking back to, you have certain skills, Phoebe has certain skills. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap, but there's also, differences. Maybe how has, when you came on, there was a product. I'm sure there's been a lot more work to establish that product market fit. You've obviously moved into new lines. Now you guys have sleepwear and other products. Maybe how has Ettitude's course over this past few years affected your focus areas versus Phoebe's? And maybe how did you as co-founders split that up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. When co-founders start, I think there's a lot of overlap. They need to think together in terms of the vision and the strategy and what they need to allocate resources into. As the team grows, you have to manage more and more people. So what we've decided is to actually split that management. Before we had everybody essentially reporting into both of us. And as we started to grow and hire more senior managers and leaders who could actually drive specific departments, we decided to split our responsibilities a bit more. So, for example, Phoebe is leading product, sustainability, and operations, versus I'm overseeing marketing, finance, and HR. But we do understand what's happening in the other side. There's a lot of overlap still, but it does help to split up so that we can free up some bandwidth for each other.
And then you just have that trust that the other person is getting done what they need to do, right? And that's, all part of being part of a functioning team. Well, one thing that I've heard a lot recently is that, marketing today is very different from previously, partially in that there's so many more metrics available, right? There's so much more data that digital marketers use. And of those metrics, we're talking about, right, conversion rates, we're talking about traffic. Obviously, there's like lifetime value of the customer, even post-purchase. But if we really distill this down, what are some of the most important marketing performance metrics a brand needs to constantly have their pulse on?
Yeah, I think the most important thing you really need to nail down is your LTV and CAC. So you really want to figure out what is your customer bringing to you from a revenue perspective as well as from a profit perspective. And profit LTV is actually even more important. So then you take that profit LTV and you actually figure out how many of your customers are new to file versus not new to file, repeat purchasers. And then you have to figure out your CACs. How much are you willing to spend in order to not exceed the gross profit LTV of that customer, and then stick to that. Unless you are extremely well funded and you can afford to lose money on every customer just to take market share, I think it's important to make sure that you're really sticking below that LTV in terms of acquisition.
You brought up an interesting point there, right? Depending on where funding is coming from, you might be more averse to spending money to make money, right? So maybe in the early days when a brand is maybe just getting started and launching their e-com arm, what are some of the trends they might expect to see, right? Numbers are going to go down in some of these acronyms versus others. And there are some companies that look at that and say, oh my gosh, we're churning and burning. We have to get out of this. So maybe what are some of those trends someone should expect to see?
Well, in general, you should see your LTV growing. If you're doing a good job listening to your customers and creating valuable products to them and creating a loop where you continue to communicate with them and they come back to your site and keep buying more, then your LTV should grow over time. Versus CACs, it really depends, but generally CACs rise over time as well. But as your LTV grows, so can your CAC. So you can afford to spend more to acquire customers if your LTV continues to grow. At some point, as you start to invest more into omni-channel, into offline channels, into brand marketing, then your overall CACs start to decline, but you have to get there first. And in terms of just performance marketing, getting there, your CACs will rise. So that's kind of the inevitable trend that you will experience until you get to a certain scale.
And with some of the changes that have been coming out with, consumer data tracking and privacy, right? We know the iOS 14 updates that have come out. There are a number of changes made there. Anything you could speak to in terms of all the data we have access to now, how might that change in the future from a marketing lens?
Yeah, and it has already changed. So with, like you mentioned, with iOS 14, certainly any advertiser who was spending money on Facebook or some other social media platforms experienced increased CACs. And so did we, of course. Attitude did too, because we do advertise on Facebook and Instagram. So there are a couple things, small tips that I can suggest to anyone who is advertising on Facebook. So one is make sure if you're using Shopify to have CAPI, which is Conversion API, that helps Facebook and Shopify exchange data. That helps Facebook target better and basically get the results that you want. And so after doing that, we've seen the CACs actually level off and decline over time. So that's been good. Certainly everybody was very nervous around June, July about the future of Facebook advertising. Another platform that we work with is called Measured. It's an incrementality measurement platform that helps to do in-market tests to actually tell you what is the platform delivering to you in terms of customers. So what is your actual CPA versus what the platform is telling you what your CPA is. And that's been super helpful because it informed our overall strategy in terms of which channels we're pouring money into, which campaigns we should be spending more. And overall, that brought our paid CPA down.
And so I appreciate you running us through that. And you just mentioned, the importance of multiple channels, right? No brand should put all their eggs in one basket. And I know that, or my understanding, Ettitude, you guys had a retail presence. And I think that changed with COVID. Is that still up and running again? I guess I haven't really gotten an update on where that's sitting at.
So our pop-up store, we opened it in October 2019, and it ran all the way through March 2020. So right at the beginning of COVID. And we actually were going to shut it down. So it was going to be a temporary space up through April 2020. So we did shut it down right at the beginning of COVID. So after that, we have not done any retail, just waiting to see what's happening with the retail landscape first. notably, actually, just yesterday, we have some retail presence now on Abbot Kinney again, which is with Hunker, which is a media company focused on design and interior design and home products. And they've actually opened a new style of retail store where you actually don't buy anything at the store. They're featuring a bunch of brands there, including Attitude. What you do is you use your phone and you scan DOT, which is a new technology that is acting somewhat like a QR code. And it brings up a little page we can click and go directly to the website of the company and purchase there directly.
See, it's interesting. I've heard that Amazon might do similar things like that. And it's like, at the end of the day, how is that different than doing things on your phone, but you actually get to see the product? So that's actually really cool.
Yes. And I think it's important for brands where, for example, for us, it's really important for people to actually feel the fabric to figure out that it's amazingly soft compared to anything else, or other products. They might want to smell it if it's a food product, or they might want to see the packaging, feel it, touch it, just see it in real life. Plus the fact that it's on a high traffic street creates this new brand awareness.
Yeah, I know. I am apprehensive to buy certain things online, right? There are certain things out there that I just want to be able to touch or hold or feel beforehand. You just made another interesting point, right? Even your team is watching the retail market, trying to understand, okay, is this a good move for us? If so, when is it a move that we're actually gonna make? And you already are having some partnerships there. So maybe, all things considered, how should a brand today weigh the cost benefit of whether to go after retail partnerships, and maybe what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are some that are no-brainers, like the one that I just described, where it's actually an affiliate model. So we actually don't even pay unless somebody buys the products from the store. So that's an incredible opportunity for brands to touch new customers and create that new brand awareness and have experimentation in retail. So that's number one. If you're doing more traditional retail, you're running it yourself, now is a good time to do it because rents are obviously lower than they were pre-pandemic. So it is a good opportunity to test it. Or if you're bullish on it, you can even lock in really nice rates for long-term rents. So it is a good opportunity. And then in terms of retail partnerships with big retail stores, that's something that we're definitely thinking about as well. It does create that new channel that we don't have to spend money on. You do lose margin, so you have to calculate, is it worth it for you? And then the other thing is, there's a cash flow delay. The retailers will pay you 30 to 60 days after they sell the product. Different terms. You really need to be an expert in it and make sure that you do it right. So it's something to definitely consider as you continue to grow. I think the future is definitely omnichannel. There is a cap to DTC. You can become really big in DTC, but at some point you will need that omnichannel presence.
Yep. And what I've heard, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, a lot of D2C brands are focusing on Amazon because at the end of the day, 66% of consumer searches start on the Amazon search bar. A high percentage of people going to Amazon when they search for, hypoallergenic bed sheet, they're looking for that to buy it, right? They're not just looking to explore. So, I guess I haven't done a whole lot of digging into Attitude's Amazon presence. I don't know if that's a major focus for you guys right now, but I guess kind of along the same vein as retail, how should a brand decide if and or when it's the time to really focus on Amazon as a channel for themselves?
Yeah, so great question. So I completely agree with you that 66% of consumers do start their product searches there. So it is really competing with that Google search. So I think it is an important part of the mix. We are currently not on Amazon, actually. We do have a brand page there, but we're not advertising. We're not actually selling anything. And one reason is just resources that it takes. We decided that our resources are better spent on our DTC model, where we see continued growth. But in the future, as our company grows, we think that Amazon could be a really good channel.
And this may be going too far out, so we can move off of this. But so if a brand decides to sell on Amazon, how might they go about thinking about the product mix they're going to put out there. You may not want to put every single item in your catalog on the channel, because then what reason does somebody have to go to your site? So again, maybe you guys haven't put a ton of thought into this. I don't want to, put you on the spot too much.
We did actually. We initially put just our pillowcases because we wanted people to test out the fabric and then go back to our website to purchase. And so I think once we go back to Amazon, that will likely be our strategy again. It is a defensible strategy. So essentially you're there when people are searching for your brand and they can buy something, but you're not necessarily offering your entire catalog. And you're creating that opportunity for them to come back to your website, for you to capture their email address, all of their information, so that you can create that relationship with your consumer.
Yep. Nope. Absolutely. I've heard that from another number of people, and it just makes so much sense when you think about it. But so I think the last major topic that I wanted us to hit on were subscription models, right? I know Ettitude does not have one, at least not at this point. But I believe that your current business did, Try the World. Maybe could you talk a little bit about what was it about that business that made a subscription model make sense? And maybe if there are trends in a business that, this business would be good for a subscription model, these may not, or even how to begin thinking about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it made total sense for Try the World. It was the initial thought behind the business, which is you get to experience different foods from a different country every month. And because it is in the consumable space, I think it made total sense. After a certain time, you've consumed the food and you're ready for the next batch. So I think overall subscription models are great for products that you would normally purchase on a regular basis. So we do see some great subscription businesses out there doing fantastic. It doesn't make total sense for our category yet with the bedding. People don't necessarily purchase bed sheets that frequently. We're definitely thinking about it for certain products that people do refresh more frequently than others. So that, is something that we would probably do in the future. I do, believe in subscription model. It's fantastic because you can acquire users with a higher CAC because now your LTV is much higher. If they're coming back to you with a predictable revenue model, then you can definitely spend more on acquisition.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's easier. It's cheaper to bring an existing customer back to repurchase than to acquire a new one, right? I mean, that's just fundamentals. Well, Kat, I think, ultimately the last question that I want to ask you today, right? We talked at the very beginning of this conversation about the experiences that you brought to Ettitude. So maybe if you could think back, what's something that you would tell yourself back earlier in your career in the world of e-commerce that, maybe you'd tell yourself to do differently?
Great question. So I think I would do a lot of the same things, to be honest. I think the majority was really like, make sure your product is awesome. Understand what your customers want, who is your customer, how to talk to them, and then bring in an incredible team. That's very important. Having smart people in their fields who are smarter than you, that's really the key to success.
Yeah, I forget who said it, but a founder I saw, they made a post where, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're not building your business correctly, right? I think that you want to be probably the least intelligent person in the room, because that means that you hired the right people to a degree.
Yes.
Cool. Well, Kat, if people want to check out the super awesome soft bed sheets, sleepwear, and everything that Ettitude sells, where can they get in touch with your team?
Well, it's ettitude.com, of course, and that's spelled ETTITUDE. And by the way, to help you remember the name, it actually means eco attitude. So attitude with an E. And it's really built, the mission of the company of sustainability is built into the brand name. So check us out on ettitude.com.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we really, really appreciate you making the time to speak with me today. And hopefully we can have you on for future conversations.
Thank you, Nate.
Thanks, Kat. That's it for this episode of E-commerce with Coffee, powered by Amber Engine. If you haven't gotten your fix yet, be sure to get more e-commerce brand secrets on our website at amberengine.com. And don't forget to subscribe for more episodes.